Today we're looking at bike chains. It's important to replace your chain as it starts to wear out so that it doesn't damage other parts of your bike. You know when your chain is worn out either by using a tool such as this one, which is called a chain checker or a chain wear indicator. To use one of these, you simply hook the one end that's got a little hook on it into one of the narrow lengths of your chain. You hook that in and then slide it down. And if it sits up on top of your chain the way this one is here, your chain is still in good condition. If it drops into your chain, I've got a length of old chain here just to show you. So we hook this through on one of our narrow links and then we pull it up, and as you can see here that it will slide in. If we slide it in, and now we can see that it's slid all the way in, it's flat to the chain. That indicates that your chain is worn out. There is a marking on this tool of 0.5 and 0.75. If you have an 11 or 12 speed chain, if it gets to that 0.5 mark, that's where you need to replace it. If you have a 10 speed or lower chain, you don't need to replace your chain until it gets to the 0.75 mark. If you don't have one of these tools, another way that you can check your chain, it is not quite as accurate, but it does work, is get your bike into a place where you can shift it into the biggest gear on the front, and we're also going to shift into the biggest gear on the back. So I'm going to go do that quickly here. So now you can see we're in the biggest gear on the front and the biggest gear on the back. So the chain is now going around the longest route that it ever has on the bike. We can then go to the chain on the front, and if we pull on the chain, if it starts to pull away from the gear with any sort of ease, or it comes off that front gear as we pull on it, then it is time to replace your chain. The reason we want to replace our chain before it gets too worn out is as the chain wears out, it will start to wear out the gears on the back, the cassette here. It will also start to wear the gears, your chain rings on the front. Cassettes and chain rings are much more expensive than chains. If you replace your chain before it gets too worn, you don't have to replace your chain rings or your cassette. Generally, you can get 2 to 3 chains per cassette, and even more than that for the chain rings up front, if you replace your chain before it wears out. If it goes too long, you will have to replace your cassette, because when you put a new chain on, it won't mesh well with the gears. As the teeth on the gears have worn, it won't shift properly, it'll skip under power, and it just will not be a good ride. So it's best to replace your chain before it wears out. Also, you want to keep your chain clean. As you can see, this chain is nice and clean. It looks silver-ish. You can see the bare metal. That's what you're looking for. Here I have a section of an old chain that was not well cleaned. As you can see, this chain is rather black. At one point it would have been silver. There's a lot of dirt and debris on this chain. You can peel it away, and that debris basically is working as a grinding paste on your chain and wearing it out quicker. So keep your chain clean, it will last longer. Replace your chain before it wears out too far, and it will keep you on the same cassette and chain rings and help them last longer. And it will save you money in the long run, spending a little bit to replace a chain before it gets too worn. Just as it is important to keep your chain clean, it's also important to keep your chain properly lubed. And in order to do that, you will need a couple of things. You will need a chain lubricant. This one is a dry lubricant designed for riding in dry conditions. You can also get a wet lubricant designed for riding in wet conditions. The difference being a dry lubricant, the liquid that is part of this lubricant will evaporate out, leaving the lubricating particles inside the chain where they need to be, but it can get washed away fairly quickly when it's in wet conditions. A wet lubricant will stay on the chain better in wet conditions, but it will also stay there attracting more dirt. So it's best to not use a wet lubricant in dry conditions. You can get away with using a dry lubricant in wet conditions. You'll just need to apply more lubricant after every ride. The other thing you'll need to properly lube your chain is a rag or an old cloth of some sort that you can use to wipe down the chain. So I'm just going to give a quick demonstration here of how to lubricate your chain. The best way that I've found, and this is not necessarily the only exclusive way to do it, but this is just the way that I do it, that I find works well, is find your master link in your chain so you have a good starting point. And starting at that point, take your lubricant. It's important to shake any lubricant before you apply it so that any of the particles that are in the bottom that actually do the lubrication are dispersed throughout the lubricant as you put it on. So again, starting with our master link, and I'm going to put a single drop on that on the pin, and then the next one, working my way through, putting a little bit of lubricant on every roller all the way through. And as I work my way towards the back here, I'm now going to just make note of where I was, cycle that through, and go back to that same link that I was on. Again, just putting one drop on every link all the way through. The other thing that's important is note that this chain is a relatively clean chain before I'm putting the lubricant on. You don't want to put lubricant onto a dirty chain. It defeats the purpose at that point. So you want to make sure your chain is clean before. So if it isn't clean, give it a good wipe down. There are chain cleaning tools available on the market that you can use for that. You can use an old rag or an old toothbrush to brush it down and wipe off any of the debris on it. It's good to use a degreaser on it as well to get any bits of oil that may have been on there off and get any debris out of it. And again, I'm just continuing here, one drop on every link as I'm going along. And continuing, and now I am back to my master link, so I now know every link has some oil applied to it. I'm now just going to rotate the pedals backwards. What this does is allow the chain, the lubricant to work its way into the chain, especially in and around the rear derailleur here, as the chain sort of weaving its way back and forth. Giving that opportunity to get that lubricant into the inner workings of the chain. Now that I've done that, I'm going to take my rag. I'm going to grab around the chain here with the rag and pedal backwards again. And what I'm doing here is just wiping any of that excess lubricant off the outside of the chain. The lubricant doesn't need to be on the outside of the chain. We need that lubricant inside around the pins and the rollers. So there we go. I've now applied lubricant to the entire chain and then wiped off the excess. This bike is now good to go. Now I'm going to show you the components that make up a chain. So here I have a few links of a chain. This is from a chain that went onto a bike. Chains always come longer than they need to be. And then you cut a few links off of the chain when you install it on a bike. So I've taken a few of these links apart just to show you what they are. So a chain is made up of what's referred to as outer links, which on this chain here will be this link and this link, and inner links being this one and this one. Looking at it from the top, you can see, get this to an angle where you can actually see it. You have the outer links being here and here, and the inner links here and here. You can see the outer links are the ones that are outside the inner link. Inside there you have what are referred to as the rollers. The rollers are the pieces that are inside here, and then the pin being the part that goes through and holds it all together. On this chain you may notice that the pins are hollow, meaning you can see through the middle of the pins. This is a higher end lightweight chain, so it has hollow pins. A lot of bikes will have pins where the pins are solid. Again, that's just a weight saving thing that's used on some higher end chains. So when everything's taken apart, this is what you're left with. This piece here is the half of the inner link. If I can pick this up here and show you. So this is half of the inner link of a chain. The flat side that would be on the outside facing out, and you've got two little pieces that sit in here. That is where the roller, which is this piece here, that is the roller. You would have a roller that would sit on top of that piece there. We then have the second roller that sits on the other side. So we have our two rollers. We then have the second half of our inner link that would then sit on the other side of this. So the other half of the inner link, exact same as the first one, smooth on the outside, a ridge on the inside. That lines up to that. We now have our inner link with the rollers inside. That would then be paired up with the outer link, which is flat both sides, aside from a few specific edges that are angled down, and that helps with shifting. You would have an outer link pin on one side, the second outer link pin on the other side, or outer link on the other plate on the outer side, and then you would have your pin, which would slide through that hole and hold it all together. The reason I show you this is to help you understand what you're doing when you're putting oil on a chain or a lubricant on the chain. The parts of the chain that need to be lubricated are this roller here and the pin, because that's where all the contact happens. This roller is what makes contact with the teeth of the gears. It rolls around the teeth and around the inner plate of the chain. The pin sits inside and the inner plate of the chain moves around the pin. Therefore, that's the part that needs to be lubricated. Any lubricant on the outside of this plate or the outside of the outer plate, so I can show you here, any lubricant that's on the outside here does nothing other than attract dirt to the chain. The lubricant needs to be inside. So that's why I was putting lubricant on each one of these and then spinning the chain around to get this to work back and forth as it's going around the gears on the bike, giving the opportunity for that lubricant to get into those inner workings, as we see here, to give it the opportunity to get where it needs to be. We then wipe the excess off the outside because it doesn't need to be there. What it will do on the outside is attract dust and dirt, and that dust and dirt will then work its way into these rollers and the pins and become like a grinding paste and wear out your chain quicker. I hope you found this video interesting and that you've learned a thing or two about how chains work and how to properly care and maintain them. Thanks for watching. If you have any comments or questions or any videos you'd like to see in the future, please leave comments down below, and I will do my best to respond to those comments and create any videos that you're looking for. Again, thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one.